Hey there, Norman here from Rome FM. Welcome to the video. I wanted to make this really quick intro to show you my journey or my relationship with aesthetics in trying to create a custom CSS setup for my Rome research account, or like my graph rather, because there's going to be some strange rationales and some strange pursuits, but I will also be introducing some extensions and implementations and add-ons and stuff like that. So you can get a start on beautifying your own graph and creating your own experience. Because there's something really useful about having aesthetics taken into consideration when writing about something or when thinking about something. You want to personalize it, you want to add your own flair, and maybe you want to look at somebody else's setup to use as a reference or as a mini guide or as a way to immerse yourself into their shoes, or to take a look at how they do things and how they rationalize things and think, okay, I agree with this, I disagree with this. And this is my video for trying to help with that. So if you are interested in setting up your own CSS stuff, this will be a demonstration of that. So take care and enjoy the video. In this video, I'm going to talk about aesthetics and how they play a part in capturing our attention, as well as manipulating colors, formatting, etc., so that we can make the most out of anything that we write down in our relative note-taking application, or our senses, our perceptions, etc. Because I feel like we're underutilizing colors in how we do about thinking about things. And there's nothing more amazing than, applying a little bit of spice, a little bit of aesthetics into our note-taking system. So I'm going to show a little bit of demonstration on my notebook. So might as well go straight to my phone camera. Right, in the previous video, I was showing this demonstration of this really messy diagrams and stuff like that. For this video, aesthetics really plays a part in manipulating how we pay attention to specific notes on a page or on a screen. From far, this is just a bunch of scribbles. Don't mind the handwriting. This is just a bunch of scribbles, arrows, and bullet points, and all these like notations, etc. Aesthetics can actually play a huge part in determining things like priority, importance, and also ways to give you pauses. And I'll explain pauses in a minute, but when we start to use colors to make sure that something is more important than the other, we start to see where the natural connection of things applies, because we are looking in front of us that, these colors are different. As an example, this page is just all blue ink. I'm going to take some highlighters. I want to look at this diagram here where it says principles split into outer and inner. I want to make sure that this diagram is highlighted. Not that I'm going to color the whole thing, but I want to tell myself this diagram is a summary or a culmination of everything that is falling beneath it. So I look at it and be like, okay, this pink highlighter, principles, outer, inner. When I look at this page now, these three, because they stand out, they are deemed as more important. That captures my attention. Another example is if I take this other highlighter and I look at here, here, and here. Another color to determine that these 3 points are important. So not even reading anything from here. It's just, okay, there's a diagram, but then there's these 3 colored points. Okay, those are important. And then there are these 3 colored points as well. And those are important. But we don't know what the relationship between them is. So you come in with the previous assumption that these notes are taken from top to bottom. So there has to be some level of hierarchy. These colors help me determine which colors are higher in that hierarchy or lower. In this case, maybe the pink highlight represents these points that are way more important than anything else in the page, but then these points are subheadings or subpoints that are way more important than anything that doesn't have any form of color, but they fall under the umbrella of these 3 main points. We know this, right? We've been doing this in like university or, high school or whatever. This is just a very basic like 101 primer on, how color works in paying or capturing our attention when we're trying to study for something or when we're trying to think through something. Now, how would you want to apply that to a digital context? I'm going to move to Rome here, where we start to look at formatting, we start to look at headers, and we start to look at colors and fonts. So in the world of aesthetics, or in the world of outliners and note-taking systems, etc., we have different forms of formatting. So we have bold, italic, highlight, header. These different formats help distinguish different written words or sentences or blocks fully even from each other, or from those right next to each other, or even in their own relative hierarchy for their block, a lot more. And the subjective rationale for that just depends on yourself. Maybe for the standard person, having something bold makes it much more important than the rest of the sentence. In this case, I put bold around this specific point so that I tell myself, okay, then if I'm just glancing through this page, all I have to do is just look at the bold part of it and then essentially look at first glance and summarize, okay, this block is just talking about that bold part. So I don't have to reread the whole thing and then try to understand the context all the way around it. If this consists of, a bajillion more blocks, but then this is all details, this is all context, and I just have to look at this and look at the bold part. Okay, it's cool. I understand that this path goes further down to rationales and explanations of why this part is bold in the first place, right? That's an example. So we have bold. We also have italics or italic. We also have highlight. We also have headers. And we also have quotes. These formats can really help you when it comes to determining or distinguishing specific things. Maybe italics is instructions for you, the user of the graph. Maybe highlight is something that you have physically highlighted in the book, but then you want to distinguish what is written ad verbatim from a source into your graph, and you're thinking, okay, let me just highlight that part so that I don't confuse it with my own writing or my own semantics, as we explained in a different video. Headers makes more sense. I guess the size or the font size of a block can determine its hierarchy immediately at first glance. So if you have a header 1 and this is like, when I am just going through my own page or my own graph, I can just look at this header. This header is just massive. It's just huge. And it just tells me, right, this is a blog post, or this is a page, or this is going to be a big one, basically. And it's split into different levels of formatting. So we have integrated, or we have this ingrained understanding that these formats have specific definitions and they are tacit. They depend on our understanding of our own graph. Your rationale for bolding something could be different from me. My rationale for putting italics on something would be different from you. And maybe for some people, they would never ever use header 1. Maybe they would only use header 2 and onwards. For example, myself, I don't use header 1 like at all. I only use header 2 in my graph because most of the time, whenever I header 1 something, it might as well just becomes its own page. And also sometimes the font size is just too large and it just looks ridiculous. So that's just a personal preference. So I just decide to have no definition for header 1 in my note-taking system. So this is good, right? Yeah, The thing is, with vanilla Rome, it's very bare bones. Like, how many colors are there on here? Like, bold is black, but more black, just thicker, which makes sense because that is what bold is supposed to be. But when you're going through the page, or when you have like a long piece of text, sometimes you might miss a few things. At least for me, sometimes you might miss a few things unless they are obviously very different in color, like highlight. But I don't always use highlight as an example. Maybe you want to introduce more definitions beyond the formatting feature of what Rome can provide. So this is when we start to use CSS. CSS is pretty useful. CSS is fantastic because you can start to add way more layers while still using the same features that is present in Rome Research Graph, or in the same note-taking system. It's just that you can personalize it a lot more. And this is coming down to one's relationship with aesthetics. If I have specific relationships with colors, maybe this color represents something in my life, or this color pops a lot more to me, then I can try to take advantage of that because it will capture my attention way more than it would if it's just on a bare bones black and white theme in, for example, vanilla Rome. As an example, I'm going to copy over this specific bunch of blocks, and I'm going to put it here immediately, and we'll see the difference between the both of them are, how they look. So functionally, they're the same, right? Functionally, they're the same. But subjectively speaking, I can remember everything on the left way more than I can everything on the right. Because once you start adding information in the form of color onto notes that all you see is just words 24/7, especially if you're using your graph all the time, you want to add a little bit of spice to make it a lot more memorable to you so that you can distinguish between pages and pages and pages of text because you're manipulating colors to make it look different. What do I mean by that? Firstly, we don't depend on our graphs for everything. You don't just outsource everything and put it into the graph. If you do it like that, then you might as well just forget everything and then just put it into this graph. But that creates dependency. That creates this huge reliance on your graph being able to do everything for you. But most of the time, thinking happens here, and then it gets applied onto your graph. So you have to be very careful about depending too much on your graph. The way that this works for me, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of colors, is that not only do I have the exact same information, so I can just try to remember it from an informational angle, but I would also start to notice the difference in the amount of colors on my page or on my screen at one time, and I can add that as another extra detail for recalling later. When I'm walking down the street and I'm talking about or thinking about aesthetics, I'll be like, oh yeah, there's a lot of bold, there's a lot of red in the word aesthetics. There's only like one highlight, and I remember it, popping a lot from this one book that I read from 2 years ago or something. And there was one blog post where I wrote about something related to it, and it just really, really popped out because if I close my eyes and I try to remember this specific page, the largest size font block would pop out the very first thing. It's the first thing that comes out. And that helps because when you want to navigate your own graph in your head, and I don't know if anyone else does it, maybe it's just me, I'm just being weird, but when you're trying to recall and remember these things in your head, you're playing with ideas all the time, but you need to know how to navigate through those ideas at different levels. The equivalent is if you try to do this same thing with Rome in front of you. So imagine thinking about an idea and you're trying to conclude it, you're trying to explore it, and it's right there in front of you, we already have tacit definitions of the hierarchies between these blocks. So if this is a block that lives underneath this block, then this belongs underneath this block through a specific rationale. It could be that, oh, this has some amazing idea, and then this is like a reason why that idea works. It could be like that, right? But we read it, and then we make that connection. What if you don't have your graph open? What if you don't have your laptop with you? What if you don't have any technology? How do you make that same step, or how do you take that same step when you have your graph just disappear? This is when you have to start worrying about visualizing these words as much as possible. And it's a lot harder to do so when there's only maybe 2 colors on it. So that's probably my justification for adding a lot more aesthetics. Also, it just feels really good, right? It just makes you really happy. I like having, different levels of purple. I like having purple links, right? Like, I like having red bold. I like having quote boxes that will pop out a lot more, because compare this quote and this quote, this one stands out way more. And the best part is, even if the formats exist within the quote block, they still retain their coloring. So you can still add even more complexity, but of course, not too much, otherwise it would confuse you. Like so. And you compare it here. This doesn't pop out as much as this. Just move this for you. It doesn't really pop out as much as this. I don't know. I guess it's just because my relationship with these colors work really well. So when you're deciding on what colors to pick, when you're deciding on what the rationale behind specific colors, it's best to actually figure out the reason why you would pick a color like that. You first pick your background color, a color that you don't mind looking at on your screen all the time. You pick a specific type of color that contrasts that, and that becomes your body text color. You pick a color for bold, you pick a color for italics, and then you start experimenting with different colors and different levels of saturation, brightness, and what have you, different color combinations. I have rationales for each and every one of these colors, so that works really, really well. And it's not like one giant package that you just get in one go and you think, okay, yeah, this works. Okay, cool. These colors I've collected over the years, so you're not going to get all of it in one go, and that's perfectly fine. So the best part is to experiment. That being said, I will post the code for this specific CSS. This CSS, I call it kajiya, which is the Japanese word for forge, so where blacksmiths go to hang out. And it is based off of a custom version. It is actually a custom version of the Dracula Pro theme for Rome, done by Abe Prasanna. So shout outs to Abe for that. And it comes with different fonts as compared to the original, and my own chosen colors. So, I mean, I wish I could patent this color combination, but Although I have based it off of the Cobalt theme from Typora, which is a Markdown writer app for free. And then I've changed it a little bit here and there just to fit my needs a little bit more. So, yes, CSS works really, really well. What works later on is things like, oh, what other minute things can I add to increase efficiency to a certain degree to serve my knowledge work or to serve my Rome usage better without it becoming like a giant, Jackson Pollock painting of a Rome research theme. Another thing to point out is that in the realm of capturing attention, I also have this path right here. So as an example, this works really well, or is really, really useful for keynotes and explanations. sometimes there's a lot of colors, and someone who is viewing your graph is thinking, where am I supposed to look at? So this path actually works, actually helps so much. So this is called All Paths Lead to Rome, made by Aslan Elza, I believe. So I will also put that here. And this is another form of capturing your attention. I want you to navigate your attention towards the yellow line. So in this case, maybe I want to go here. Then all you have to do is just follow the yellow line, and you would be aware of where I am when I'm contemplating or thinking about something. So yes, those are just examples, right? I tend to find and experiment with different colors and extensions so that I can figure out whether or not I can hack my attention as much as possible. As an example, maybe I want to explore aesthetics, and this is going to be a blog post, and the blog post tag is called a weapon. Here's the thing. When I let go of my cursor on there, it disappears because I have an extension that would help me disappear or like hide any entity that is written in the form of a hashtag. So if this was written just as an entity, it would exist. But then I put my cursor over it, and then all the hashtags part exists. So this reduces the percentage chance of me having my attention pulled by some random hashtag on my graph. So as an example, I have my daily template, and this just looks like a very, very simple daily template, but then I would have hashtags for each and every one of them, right? What have you discovered? I have a tag for discoveries. My thought mine, or my thinking tag, or my time stream, what happened during the day. These are some examples of the ways in which someone can use colors, use extensions, and also use different ways to manipulate attention so that it actually serves you better. To make sure that you have some, intentional constraints that you want to have served, as opposed to something that would actually stress you out and then you just don't, work, or you're not as effective as you want to be. The last thing I want to demo a little bit is the Masonry extension, which works really, really well. So if I have this page and I want to look at this side to side, a good example using vanilla would be that this is now on the sidebar, and then anything else that gets put into the sidebar just goes straight down here. And that's okay. That's fine. It's very valid for a lot of workflows. But for myself, I'm not really a fan of it. And that's okay. It just means that there are different needs. So I went and implemented the Masonry extension, which is handled by Abe and Murph. As well, so shout outs to Murph. I missed the guy. Masonry helps a lot in making sure that your monitor screen is not limiting your attention. By having the Masonry extension installed or implemented, you can go beyond the scope of what your monitor can show you, which is supposedly what the sidebar is also doing as well. Instead of it all being in one row, you can also manipulate to what extent how much the space of each page is taking up. So when I start to have this Masonry open and have all these like pages and blocks open on the sidebar, I can pin the main page so it starts moving, and then I can go left and right. I use the scrolling function at the bottom so I can move horizontally, and then I can start perusing all of my blocks and all of my notes in a very horizontal fashion, and also manipulate the the amount of space that they're taking in case maybe some is just not that big or some is not that small or not even worth it. Or there are some things in the sidebar I still want to keep pinned or reorder. Oh. In a way where it fits my peripheral view. So that helps a lot, really, to be honest, a lot more than sidebar. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about that. And yeah, that's pretty much it, really. That's all of the, anything else, any other CSS or notations or anything like that, those are minor compared to the big ones that I've just shared. These are what I use like just about most of the time. So with that being said, thank you for watching this. If this is inspiring you to start your own like custom version of a CSS or a setup that takes aesthetics into consideration, then feel free to tweet at me or comment in the video below. But this is my rationale or my journey and how do I arrive at this point. Sometimes having these specific sets of colors has resulted in me looking at things in a very weird but interesting angle, where most of these notes, these perceptions, as soon as I apply this color palette to this perception, I turn into like note-taking knowledge work mode. I turn into, oh, it's time to integrate. Oh, it's time to find connections. Oh, it's time to link these things, right? I start implementing forms of ecosystem thinking. And aesthetics help with immersing you into that mode, no matter where you go. There's also some kind of like unique signature to it as well, because I feel like no one's going to take these colors away from me. So it just makes it more precious. And I would like to make my graph as precious to me or as unique to what I think or what I like to look at as much as possible. And one way to personalize that or add a little bit of flair into that pursuit is to add my own beautiful colors. So yeah, hopefully that works well. I hope this video is going to be very useful to someone somewhere out there. That being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.